going to make a video about hypocrisy, but I came upon something really interesting regarding Samson, so I wanted to make another video about that. I made a video about the story of Samson and Delilah earlier this week, and I was reading through a book of mine, trying to study some of the parallels between the Canaanite and the Israelites, and I came upon in this book that I was looking at. It's one of the books I bought recently, and it gives a list of parallels between the Ugarit writings, language-wise, and the writings of the Hebrew Bible. And in this book, there was a section of this particular word in Ugaritic which was spelled Ari, and the footnotes, or the notes, the accompanying commentary was connecting it with a Hebrew word that once existed in the Hebrew language, but which no longer does. But it does exist in the sister languages, such as Arabic. Arabic goes back to the original Hebrew. Arabic split off from the original Hebrew in a similar way of how the Romance languages split off all from Latin. And so many times, because a lot of the words of Hebrew were lost, because most of the writings of Hebrew were lost, the other languages which have fuller literature, they preserved other words that once existed in the Hebrew language. And one of those words is a word for honey. In Arabic, there's a word in honey that is pronounced something along the lines of Ari. And so traditionally, the normal riddle, so there's a riddle of Samson in the book of Judges, where Samson comes upon a lion and he kills the lion in self-defense. Later on, he comes back and discovers that some bees have made a nest in the carcass of the lion and have produced some honey. Samson gets some honey for himself and eats it and continues to walk on. Then he meets with some of the Philistines and decides to pose a riddle to them. Now, many of us, perhaps you guys may relate to this when reading this story. The way the riddle reads sounds very strange. It doesn't make sense to us, right? Because a lot of us, when we were reading this riddle, we thought in our heads, well, that's not really a fair riddle, because there's no way the people would have known the answer to the riddle. Because Samson, it appeared that Samson was just arbitrarily using an event in his life and making it into a riddle. It kind of reminds me of the Hobbit movie, the cartoon Hobbit movie, of Bilbo, and they were doing the riddle match, and then Bilbo basically makes up this really dumb riddle where he says, what do I have in my pocket? And Gollum's like, well, that's not a fair riddle, you know. That's kind of that's how it seems when you read the passage from the book of Judges. That's what it's like. It's like, wait, that's not really a fair riddle. How could they guess that riddle? Well, from what I discovered, this is pretty amazing, is that, okay, so the word used in Hebrew for honey is primarily the word, I believe it is pronounced debash, and the word for lion is a word called Ari. Now, like I said earlier, there is a word in Arabic that for honey that means that is pronounced as Ari, or something very similar to that pronunciation. So, instead of this strange riddle that doesn't make sense, it actually makes much more sense if the original Hebrew said Ari for honey instead of debash, because then it would be, the answer would be that it's almost the same sound. Like, so in other words, so the riddle goes like this. It goes, out of the eater, something to eat, and out of the strong, something sweet. So the key to this riddle setup, the first line is telling you that the word is identical. Just like in English, we have similar words. The words are the same, but two different words. They sound the exact same or very similar. You have the same thing in other languages, including Hebrew. And so the first line is telling you the eater and the thing eaten are spelled or sound almost exactly the same. That's the key, that's the hint of the first line. And then the second line is out of the strong, something sweet. So that first word we're being told is something strong and spelled a certain way and pronounced a certain way. And the second word is something sweet, and it's pronounced and spelled almost exactly the same as what is strong. That's the idea of the riddle. So, with this idea that the Arabic word for honey actually was the original word used in the Hebrew passage of the riddle for Samson, it would have been, the answer would have been, it would have been what is as strong as a Ari, lion, and what is as sweet as honey, Ari. What is as strong as Ari, and what is sweet as Ari. And it probably had a slightly different pronunciation, because it probably had different, like one letter different. But the pronunciation was almost identical in the two words. I have to do more research to see how the Hebrew word would have been spelled. But the Ari and Ari connection is too similar to be coincidence. I think that explains this riddle, and that would have allowed the Philistines to be able to figure out what the answer to the riddle was. Because, as I said, it wouldn't have been fair for a riddle that's solved. But this riddle in particular was actually quite solvable if they used a little ingenuity. So I will give you a translation that kind of captures this idea. So instead of saying, like, the actual Hebrew says something along the lines of what is more sweet than honey. So what is more strong than a lion, and what is more. But instead of more than, I'm gonna instead, in the translation, to capture what's going on here, I'm gonna use as and like, the words as and like instead. So the first line would be something along the lines of excuse me, what is strong as a lion, and you know how in the English language you have, like, at the end of words you have a Y at the end sometimes, like like sticky, happy, funny, you have the Y at the end. That's a word, that's an ending that you put to a lot of words. So if you had something like that, where you had, like, what is strong as a liony animal, what is sweet like honey, which is, so the second line, or the second part of it, like honey, I'm using like instead of as here to capture the similar sound, you know, for lion. And then the second one is like hun, lion, like honey. So liony animal and like honey. So that's kind of what you're seeing in the actual Hebrew. You would have Ari and Ari, and that would be the riddle. But in later manuscripts of the passage, it was changed. The Hebrew word was changed from Ari to Debash, so that the reason it was changed is because just like in our language, English, but in other languages as well. Older archaic words, over time, if they're not used as much by a people, they start to become obsolete and archaic words that no one uses anymore. And when that happens, no one knows those words. They don't know what those means anymore. A lot of people, for example, don't even know what the English word thou means. Thou is just the singular of you, but a lot of people would not know that. You ask, what does thou mean? And they don't know. So the more time you don't use a word in a language as a whole group, the more the words get lost in their meaning to the people. Because if you don't use a word, you never hear it, you never encounter it, then you don't know the word. So most people in Hebrew speaking didn't know this word for honey. The scribes, knowing that, they wanted people to understand the passage, so they replaced the older word for honey, or the more rare word for honey, ari, and they replaced it with dabash, so that people would understand what was being said. But because they did that, that caused us to lose the meaning of the riddle. So now the meaning of the riddle was lost to us. So now it was unclear for 2,000 years. The meaning of the riddle eludes almost everybody. But with the parallel meaning from Arabic and apparently Ugaritic as well, we come to understand that the original word there was ari for honey. And like I said, the English translation, it's kind of a little bit dumb, but it kind of captures the idea. Like what I said was, as a liony animal, what is strong as a liony animal, what is sweet like honey thing, like a honey dish or something. So basically, that sound similarity was exactly the same that you were having in Hebrew, and that explains the reason Samson gave that riddle. And I think that's mind-blowing. It really opens up the depth of, like, once you start studying the Hebrew behind it and studying what the original readings were, it really opens up a new dimension to the scriptures. I think as I study and as you guys study, we're going to find some amazing things like this. So many things are going to start opening up to us, popping out, and really changing our understanding and perception of what we're seeing. I've mentioned this before, but another example, this isn't like a riddle or anything, but this is just an example of two different languages using a similar word. Basically, Hebrew had both these words originally, but over time, the different languages that descended started to use one of the two words and stopped using the other word. So the two words are ben and bar. Both mean son. But in reality, both don't mean son. Neither actually mean son literally. They mean son in the implication. So the word for ben actually comes from a Hebrew root word which means to build. It means to build, ben. There's a verb in Hebrew, benah, which means to build. And so when you have a ben of someone is the ben of so-and-so, what you're actually saying is that they are the construction of someone. So if someone has a child, that child has been built by the father, constructed. Hence, they are a ben. They are a construction. They are a ben. And then likewise for bar comes from the Hebrew root word for from create, which is bar, and also is spelled or pronounced bara. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, bara. So there used to be the word in Hebrew that also meant son, and it was bar, and it meant creation. So you got the one word, construction, which means son, and you got the other word, creation, which means son. So both can refer to son, but both can refer to anything. They can refer to anything built. Ben Ben can refer to anything built. Bar can refer to anything created. But over time, they started being associated with particularly son, the meaning of a child that was either constructed or created by the father. So that's just that one word. There's so many other words, and I'm gonna, in the future I'll do a video on those words in particular to show more depth to those particular words. But I'm just mentioning that to give you some depth. Well, so it looks like we only have you on, just one person. Did you want to, I don't know if you're on the chat function. Did you want to say anything or give your thoughts or questions or comments? But if not, I might end it shortly. As you can tell, I'm still kind of not fully recovered. I still have somewhat of a cold, but I wanted to do this video despite my cold that I still have. So, anything you want to say? And I will be doing, hopefully tomorrow, I'll be doing the video on what a hypocrite is. I alluded to that earlier this week. I was going to make a video on that, and I still want to do that. But I wanted to make this particular video about the riddle. I wanted to make that first. So, okay, it doesn't look like you have any questions. So, but if you do have questions, you can leave a comment in this YouTube video. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. God bless you. Hope you have a great rest of your day and a great week. Shalom.